It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre today on Gene and Roger Talk Movies. I'm
Yoy.
I'm Roger,
Yes. Eugene.
and we are talking about Tobe Hooper's classic 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, released October 11th, 1974. Of course, Tobe Hooper would go on to direct the underrated The Funhouse, Eaten Alive, and of course, he is the credited director on Poltergeist, even though there's a lot of controversy over how much of that he actually directed. But anyway, Gene,
Interesting.
initial thoughts on Texas
Texas
Chainsaw.
Chainsaw Massacre. Oh my gosh. Well, Roger and I, we do a horror movie podcast, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre had to be reviewed at some point. So, yeah, so here we are, so reviewing this movie. And so if you like horror movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre might be the number one of all in the genres of horror movies that maybe kind of started it all or made it the modern era or initiated the modern era of horror movies. So if you're a horror movie fan, you've got to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't know. Do I like the movie? Like, was it scary? Or what? I don't know if I'm really such a fan, honestly. It like it gets the movie. There's a lot going on in this movie. I think you can make a lot of parallels between the different characters. There's a lot of like social commentary I think happening here. But the movie does it seems to violate some of my classic rules for horror movies. One is likable characters. Are the characters likable? I'm not so sure. You know, um, some things happen. Just it seems like out of nowhere. The characters, like oftentimes people make fun of horror movies because the characters in the horror movies oftentimes have a choice, and the choice is abundantly clear. You can go one way, and the one way has a sign that says safety, and you can and light, and you can go the other way, and the sign on that road says darkness and death. But the characters, instead of choosing the road that says light and safety, they choose the road that says darkness and death. And so again, many times here, the characters, instead of choosing the obvious path, which I think most reasonable people would, they chose the other way, and so that it ended up being their destruction. And so this movie kind of a little bit falls into that horror movie, whatever you want to call it, but that trope or that it makes it easy to like make fun of this movie because the characters make such obvious foolish choices. So, do I like the movie? Uh, uh, it's so sometimes it's hard to not like something that is such a classic. But would I recommend this movie to people? No, I would not recommend.
And Gene, I am on the complete opposite side of the fence with you there.
Yes. Wait,
Um,
how many times have you seen this movie?
it's more than 50, and
50.
and I
Gosh.
I watched it again Thursday night just in
51.
preparation of this. But I believe
I think
this.
Roger likes this movie.
Yeah, I do. I actually, not only is it one of the greatest horror films of all time, in my opinion, it's on my list of greatest films of all time. And one of the reasons that I really, really like this movie, if you want horror, this movie is it because it takes you down some dark alleyways, and is pretty unrelenting tension-wise as it goes. There is a extensive chase sequence which I think is brilliantly filmed. Marilyn Burns, who plays the character of
Sally.
Sally, is over the top with her commitment to this role, in her screaming and the
Yeah,
physical
her.
abuse that she takes in this. And the thing that I really enjoy about this film is you enter this world. They're basically the story for those of you that have no idea what this movie's about. There's been this grave robbing going on deep in Texas, and so Sally, her brother Franklin, who's in a wheelchair, their friends Kirk, Pam, and Jerry get in this
Jerry.
van and they drive down to this cemetery to check it out and see if Grandpa's grave has been desecrated. Well, while they're down there, they also decide, hey, we'll stop by our old boyhood home where we grew up.
Right, Sally and Franklin are brother and sister.
And then they basically run afoul of this extremely deranged family of killers. But what
Who lives next door.
right,
to
who lives
their
right around the thing there.
old house where their grandparents lived.
But what I like about it is this world you enter, it seems to be off a step. Everything about it seems to be off. Every character seems to be off. I love the fact that the film opens with this bizarre music soundtrack. The soundtrack is bizarre. It's these weird sounds that you haven't heard before, and so it's immediately setting this tone of this world is different than the normal world. I really enjoy the sequence. Just to back up the world is different. When they do get to the graveyard, there's that drunk character right in the middle of this crowd of people laying there on
Wasn't
the
he
ground.
the sheriff?
No, he was the cemetery caretaker, and he's horribly drunk, and he's babbling on about stuff, and he's
There's some
basically
strange characters in
saying,
this movie.
I see things. I enjoy the very opening of the film where major credit to cinematographer Daniel Pearl. This was basically his first movie, but he does this great sequence where it's complete darkness. You hear this grave robbing happening, and this character is creating this work of art out of these desiccated corpses. But he's also taking photos of them, and so the camera flash will go off, and for a brief second, the entire screen is illuminated with this blinding white light, where then you can see exactly what he's taking photos of. And so I think right away,
decomposed hands.
Right, and right away, I just think
skulls.
you're just setting it up to where
Pretty awful stuff.
This world is off, and we're gonna take you down this road of complete depressing terror.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the movie starts out, then they're grave robbing in Texas. So it's such a pleasant topic, So it lets us know that we're going to be in for how long is this movie?
Well, and again, the other reason I love this film, and Gene, I've talked to you about this before, but I truly believe that 83-minute runtime is ideal for horror because you get in, you do what you need to do, and you get out, and you don't have a lot of filler scenes and just stuff that doesn't matter. And that 83-minute mark, that is beautiful for horror.
Yeah, 83 minutes. So, yeah. But I don't know. I'm going to sigh. I'm going to sigh again. So, yeah, it starts off, you're in this van, this Ford van. And so along the way, they pick up a hitchhiker. So it's the first bad mistake right there. and a telling right there is like, they see a hitchhiker, and it's like, oh, there's a hitchhiker, let's pick him up. And I think it's Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Pam immediately says, he looks pretty creepy, let's not pick him up. And so, but what do? They pick him up. So, yeah, and this guy, if you looked at him, would I pick him up? There is no way in the world I'm picking this guy up. Yeah, he's completely disheveled. He's got a huge facial mark. His clothes are terrible. The way he's carrying himself is not very good. Yeah, but they let him sit in the van. Yeah,
Well,
and so the movie starts off right away with just abhorrent behavior because this guy comes into their van and Roger, I'll let you take it away.
Well, but again, this is another sequence where everything is off. It, of course, is set in 1973. And I will also mention at the very beginning there's this crawl of narration where they're talking about the terrible Texas Chainsaw Massacre and how
Right.
this
They
is.
make it seem like it's
They're
true.
trying to say
Like
that
it
it's
really
a true
happened.
story. And just as an aside, there, John Larroquette is the person who did the narration for that. You may remember him from his long-running role on the sitcom Night Court. So he went on to much greater things after this film. But this also is just set in the 70s, and so the 5 main characters, they're all flower children, hippies, and that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, early 20s for sure, mid
right.
20s. Yeah,
And
all of
so
them.
it's just, yeah, it was a common thing back then. Yeah, we're going to pick up hitchhikers, and we're used to it, Woodstock generation, all that kind of stuff. But right before that, they had also done this really
was
nice.
that a really common thing? Like, would you pick up even then somebody who looked kind of like that guy?
Well, but
I'm skeptical. I'm a little skeptical there.
I am going along with their idea of picking that person up because, you know, they're just a bunch of dirty hippies at the end of the day, right? And so they all want to help out.
Well, I don't know if they're dirty.
Well,
They
you know.
seem pretty clean
I
to
know,
me.
but they all, you know, because they have Pam, they have the sequence with Pam where she's reading
bring
those
up a-
horoscopes and all that.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up a point there. You use the word dirty. I think there's an obvious contrast there because I think there are two worlds being portrayed here. And in the beginning, I alluded that this movie makes a little social commentary. But yeah, you can even look at the hitchhikers and that world and the hitchhikers' family and the world that they run into there in Texas and the world that they inhabit. You know, I'm talking about like Sally and Franklin, Pam, Kirk, and Jerry. Their world, like their world is light and they're clean. They're clean kids. You know, young adults. You know, they have futures and they're going to do all that. However, this other world that they enter is completely dirty. They have no future. It's really dark. There are different value systems in play here. And so, but yeah, it's like there are other movies that get into this kind of clash of cultures. It makes me think of another 70s movie that it's not really horror, but I think a good movie that maybe people should see, but Deliverance. You know, it kind of gets into, again, this culture clash that oftentimes there's cultures that exist in the United States that for whatever reason are quote unquote invisible. Like most of us inhabit the world of Sally, Franklin, Pam, Kirk, and Jerry. However, there are other parts of our culture that are invisible that we don't see. And I think in this movie, it explores that. We touch and we visit and we get to see part of our country that, yeah, is dark and it's dirty. And it is that road that if you go down it, it doesn't lead to good places. And so doesn't necessarily mean that the people who inhabit that kind of life, they're all like murderers or psychopaths. No, they could be great people as well, of course. But it's just a different part of our culture that I think is just not ever seen, you know, even to this day. I'm sure there are parts of America that are very much like, yeah, Texas, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that part, yeah. Or even going back to the movie Deliverance, you know, that parts of the culture that they run into there.
Right, and I will do a shout out to Ed Neal, who plays the hitchhiker here in this sequence.
Ed Neal.
Love his acting.
He's probably my favorite character in this movie, yeah.
Because he really, one of the thing is there's 3 of the evil family members, and I just think all 3 of them really gave their all to the role. And Ed Neal certainly does that here. You immediately are on edge when he's in that van. And the other thing, too, to point out with this van, very claustrophobic. It is sweltering hot out there.
Yeah, does it have AC?
You know?
Probably not.
No, definitely not. And, you know, you can just see the sweat and the kind of the oppressive heat that's happening in there, too.
Yeah, Franklin is in a wheelchair and a little bit overweight, but he is definitely complaining about the heat. So, and it's Texas in the summer. My gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I totally agree. I think the three characters who compose the what do you call it, the Dark family, they drive this movie, and yeah, those three characters, they make this movie happen, especially that hitchhiker character.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's four members of that family.
Well, yes, there is.
Maybe we'll get into that, and this is it's really strange, but yeah, that guy, the hitchhiker, he makes this movie happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's an interaction in the van where you're not at ease the entire time he's in that van, because he is clearly off, clearly mentally unstable, clearly dangerous.
Yeah,
and
but yeah, I'll throw this in there. But at first, to give the credit to Sally Franklin, Pam Kirk, and Jerry, they really try to engage this guy and just talk to him, and yeah.
Yeah, there's no normal talking to this guy.
Well, you can tell they're a little off. Like they're like, oh, what's up with this guy? But they're trying. Like you can see that they're trying. But then, did the hitchhiker guy have a name?
Well, no, he's only credited as the hitchhiker in the film.
So he doesn't really. I didn't pick up that he had a name, but they're trying to talk to this guy, and he's talking to them. But then the hitchhiker notices that Franklin has a pocket knife, and it seems right here at this moment, this movie just takes off because he just goes up and he just takes the pocket knife out of Franklin's hand, and then he takes it, and with it he cuts his own hand in his left palm somewhat deeply. Yeah. And the hitchhiker seems to like it.
Yes, he does.
And of course, Sally Franklin, Pam Kirk, and Jerry, they're just like horrified. Except for maybe Jerry. I think Jerry's driving.
Right. He's not able to see all.
He doesn't really see. And it just seems at that point they should have just pulled over. Some of the parts in this movie that, again, I fault is, I think a normal group of people, they would have pulled over right there and just kicked that guy out. But they just keep on driving. The hitchhiker cut his hand, is bleeding all over the place. Yeah, Roger, keep going.
And then he takes out his old school camera, which then leads to the fact that, he was the guy in the graveyard taking those shots earlier.
Right.
And he takes a photo of Franklin, and then of course he's like, I want my $2. This is a good picture and all this stuff.
Right. It's just this like a clash of cultures in a way that he brings out this camera. Is that if you look at the hitchhiker, he's really dirty. His clothes are disheveled, like he hasn't taken a shower in a month. At
least
you can tell, or a year even. And so, but he's holding this camera, which is really a nice camera. It's just one of those cameras of that era, that if you take a photo, it self-develops. And so you got to be thinking, where did he get this camera? It's probably pricey for that time. He probably took it from one of a previous victim. And so, but yeah, he takes a photo of them. He demands some money.
Yep, and they're not going to pay him, so he decides to set up a little makeshift pyre there in the middle of the van, and he lights that picture on fire.
Yeah, he has some knowledge. He pulls out some aluminum foil. He places the photo on the foil, and then he places some kind of like chemical on
black powder or something.
Yeah, something like that on the photo, and then he lights it, and it ignites this amazing fire right in their van. And of course, Sally Franklin, Pam Kirk, and now Jerry, they're totally screaming, and they pull over, and now he's out.
Well, they pull over, but not until...
Oh, no, yeah. Oh, he does something else. Yeah, that's right. I almost forgot, yes.
He has a straight razor in his shoe, and he pulls it out, and then he cuts Franklin's arm.
Right. When everyone's kind of screaming, he pulls out his straight razor, and he cuts Franklin's arm somewhat deeply.
And so...
Right. Again, on his left arm, kind of on the top of his arm.
Get him out of the van, and he's spreading blood from his hand all over the van.
All over his van.
And they get away. They drive away, and they're all... holy crap, what did we just witness here?
Yeah, I know. And I'm thinking that right here is like where this this movie goes into this horror movie contrast where you can kind of make fun of it. Like, again, instead of choosing the path of safety or the path of darkness, they choose the path of darkness. Like most people, I think, would, this horrific event happened. My brother just got somewhat cut severely by some crazy person. So yeah, we probably should take him to see a doctor. But no, what did they decide to do? Well, a little bit's driven is that it seems they have a little bit of a fuel problem.
Right.
But the movie doesn't really get into that. Because you wonder to the extent of the fuel problem, because they still do some driving, but they just continue on with their plan, is to go to Sally and Franklin's grandfather's house, almost as if nothing had ever happened. And then they reach the house, and then Pam and Kirk go off on their own, wanting to check out like a creek or something. Maybe they could go swimming.
There was an old swimming hole back there,
Yeah,
which they discover has been dried up. But before we get into that, Gene, I do want to talk about the gas station sequence, because they do pull
Right.
up to the gas station. And here's another example of how I just think everything in this world is just like one step off. Because there's the gas station caretaker there, and then there's this other guy there who's apparently like the wash bucket guy, and he just
Right.
walks up and he like washes your windows while the gas station attendant is talking to you. But did you notice, and this is just another example of things are just off in this film, did you notice the fact that the guy had these black boots on, lace-up boots? One of them was tightly laced up all the way to the top, and the other one didn't have any laces in it at all. Who does that?
Well, I think, again, this movie is making... It's a little social commentaries here again. Just so I think because there are parallels here now, because I think, I kind of forgot about that guy. Because this movie talks a little bit about, I wonder if Tobe Hooper, maybe in his life, he knew somebody who was maybe, mentally challenged, maybe on the autistic spectrum, if you will. But Franklin clearly is probably on the autistic spectrum. He doesn't seem to be talking. He talks well, but he's got some fascination with knives, and he's always cleaning his cuticles with his knife, and then he sticks his knife into the side of the van, and he's got this fascination with knives, and he's talking about meat and stuff like that. But yeah, there's certainly something going on there with Franklin. Yeah, but then also so Franklin, of course, inhabits this world, Sally, Franklin, Pam, Kirk, and Jerry. But then that guy you just mentioned is clearly on the autistic spectrum.
Something's up.
But he inhabits the other world. And we'll soon meet another guy called Leatherface, who is clearly on the autistic spectrum, who is in that world as well. So it kind of like makes little commentaries like with people who have mental illnesses, is that in one world, they can be taken care of and they can still have, somewhat normal lives. But in the other world, maybe they're exploited. They become part of the evil machinations of other people. They're not allowed to thrive. They just become tools of, yeah.
Well, and I think also in this sequence at the gas station, we also get our first look at the gas station attendant, who later on in the film we discover is also part of the killer family.
Yeah, he's the patriarch of the killer family, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
he's actually the older brother.
Oh, he is? I thought he was the dad.
I know, and that's the big confusion. And actually,
Oh.
Tobe Hooper clarified, no, he's the older brother. But
So just to clarify, so is that guy, does he have a name?
no,
Interesting.
yeah.
Leatherface has a name. So we have
So you basically, how they're in the credits is Leatherface, of course, the hitchhiker, and then the cook.
Oh, they call him the cook. Nice, nice. So the cook and Leatherface, are they brothers?
Right. So they are all brothers.
Oh, they're all brothers. Oh, great.
Yeah, and Jim Sedow is the one who plays the cook character, and of course, in addition to the gas station,
Yeah,
he
he
also
does.
has
He does it well.
he does-
Those three characters, Cook, Leatherface, Hitchhiker. They do their characters really well.
Right, and I actually think the cook character is one of the more interesting because he can operate within the normal world.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
then he also has this incredibly dark side. So his character is almost like I'm the guy who can allow what we're doing at our house to continue,
right,
because people just, he's the happy gas station attendant and he does
right.
this cool barbecue thing. Of course, the barbecue is human meat that's happening there. But
Yeah,
he's like a really friendly guy. And the thing I like about that gas station sequence as well is they're telling him, hey, where's the old Franklin place? We want to go up there. He's like, hey, you guys don't want to go messing around up there.
yeah, he actually tells them that
Mhm.
you probably shouldn't be hanging around here.
Right.
He tells them
and
that.
so he kind of has this duality about his personality, because later in the film, he gets kind of excited when they start the killing process. But early on,
does.
he's trying to, yeah, you don't want to go up there. No, go, come in, have some barbecue, but don't go up there. And then later, he's basically saying things like, I don't really take any pleasure in killing, but a man's got to do what a man's
Yeah,
got to
he
do
says that, yeah,
sometimes, and
yeah.
things like that. So I really liked this sequence. It seems like a nothing sequence when you're first watching it. It seems like your standard trope of, yep, the gas station attendant just warning you not to go do something and you do it anyway. But in the totality of the film, no, it's really highlighting the conflict within his own character with his own mental health. So
Yeah, he could exist in both worlds. That's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So good. So they're all brothers.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, of the cook Leatherface hitchhiker, I think my favorite character again is the hitchhiker, because he just brings such a huge amount of energy, this
Mhm.
manic kind of out of
Yes.
control energy to the dark family.
Right, and
Yeah.
I just think this is another example of how this movie is just off. The world is just off, and these characters are entering into this world that's just off, and terrible things happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, we get to a sequence where they get to the house, it is completely run down and dilapidated, but they're looking around. They notice a couple weird, like, sculpture-y type things that have been
Yeah,
created
Franklin
in this
noticed
house,
this is
out of
yes.
bones and feathers and things like that. But
And Sally's running through the house, and it seems like maybe Sally and Jerry might be a couple.
correct.
Yeah. And so, like, they're talking to each other, and Sally's reminiscing about, living and spending significant time in that house. And so it's just a great time for her. But again, it's just a little off, and it's a really poor decision by that group, Sally, Franklin, Pam, Kirk, and Jerry, that they continued on this path, even though the brother, Franklin, had been seriously injured by this clearly
Mm-hmm.
psychopathic hitchhiker character. It kind of defies common sense that they would do that. But here we are. Yeah.
Right. Can't have a movie if they just go straight to
Yeah,
the
you
hospital.
can't have a movie. Yes, exactly.
And so Pam and Kirk then go out to find this swimming hole.
Swimming hole. And then, but also a little bit is I think, the director spends a lot of time with, like, the Franklin character. Like, the Franklin characters, like Pam, Kirk, and Jerry, they're all in the house, and they leave Franklin outside, and he has to get himself into the house, and is somewhat upset. I don't know. It's just you see the Franklin character, and you just kind of, he's a little off as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he's a little mad because they left him in downstairs, but of course they can't. He's a little overweight. They can't take him upstairs,
Right.
But they've left him, so maybe their choice to continue on the path is that they somehow, Sally, Pam, Kirk, and Jerry, don't value Franklin. They take him along, but they don't take him along.
Well, and I think, I do like the film because it is showing some inclusion there, because they are taking
Right.
him all the way down to this old house, and obviously to check and see if the grandparent grave had been desecrated. But then there is this, that sequence right there where, we're doing a thing right now that really it's too hard for us to get you up these stairs and all this stuff, so you kind of have to be out of it. And plus, they're both couples, so he's the fifth wheel here with
Right,
two
right.
two different couples.
And I think he sees that, and he
Mhm.
is yeah, he doesn't like it.
Right.
And earlier in the movie, there's like this a part where they're maybe careless with Franklin, is they take him out of the van. This is before anything has happened, and they because Franklin has to use the restroom, but they're really careless about where they put Franklin in his wheelchair, and so then he rolls down this hill, crashes at this bottom of the hill, is completely wiped out, you know. And it's just like how just careless that you just leave somebody in a wheelchair right next to the precipice of this hill, you know. So they were just really, yeah, the Sally Kirk couple, and then the Sally Jerry, and then the Pam and Kirk couple are really kind of like thinking about themselves, and they're really not thinking about Franklin too much.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but and we're only about 20 minutes into this movie at this point. We're talking a lot about all the early parts of this film, but again, it's just setting this mood as we really move towards the more brutal aspects of this film. And so Pam and Kirk are going down to check out this watering hole. Right. Turns out the watering hole has long since dried up.
Yeah.
But then they hear a generator from across the way, and they're like, oh, we could maybe go there and get some gas. And so they head towards this building, and there is a great scene as they're heading towards this building. One, again, the cinematographer is making certain that you understand the oppressive heat that's going on out here, because he's got a shot directly at the sun in this sequence. But they discover under this kind of camouflage netting a large number of vehicles under this netting. And so it's just setting the stage that, yeah, these guys do this. They've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, and these are not old, decrepit cars. These are modern cars. You know, that clearly they've been there just recently. So clearly they're the cars of other victims. Right.
Yep. And so then Kirk goes up to knock on the door, and
this is another sequence where you can kind of make fun of this movie. It's like this, like I mentioned before, there's two roads, the road of light and safety, another road. So he takes, unexpectedly, he goes down this other road, because Kirk knocks at the door, and then another sick thing happened that, again, is just, I think I guess you got to have a movie, but in real life, it makes me think, but I think I keep going back to this because I think movies have to exist within the world they set up. And so this movie is set up in our world. It's set up, even though it's in 74, it's modern times. You know, it's not that long ago, really. But, you know, people lived then just like we do now, you know. So, but he finds a human, like Pam and Kirk are on the porch, right? You know, it's hot, so Pam is sat down on the steps leading up to this porch, and then Kirk, you know, is walking around, and he kicks something, and he looks down, and he picks up, and it's a human tooth that's not broken, a perfectly intact human tooth. So what does he do? He picks it up and he puts it in Pam's hair. I mean, I can see that, you know, a prank, ha ha ha. But oh my gosh, it's a human tooth. Isn't that something? It's just this is really off. Let's not be around here. But no, Kirk, he does his little prank, and he moves on, and he goes back to knocking on the door. But then he gets kind of agitated that people aren't answering, and so he keeps knocking harder, and then finally he turns the handle. And he looks inside a little bit. But what does he do? He goes in. It's like, are you out of your mind? This house in the middle of nowhere, you don't know them, and you're gonna go in.
Well, and I think
I don't try to explain that.
So what I'm going to explain is, it's a great shot looking in, and you see a bunch of mounted skulls and things in this back room with this red wall.
Right.
And what he hears is noises coming from there.
Yeah, he hears a pig.
What appears to be a pig, or maybe is a pig. And that's what ultimately draws him into that room. But
he didn't hear the pig noise to make him open the door. He opens the door kind of on his own.
Right, the door
and
comes
then
open.
He hears the pig noise.
Right, and then he hears that. And that's what ultimately draws him into that room. And this is where we get our first murder sequence.
Right.
And I will talk a little bit about the murder sequence because Kirk goes in, there's this little wooden plank that leads up to this room, and he kind of stumbles over it. And then this hulking person appears with a sledgehammer and just drives it right into his head so hard that his body actually twists in the air, collapses to the ground, and then he hits the head one more time and drags the body in and then just slams this metal door.
Yeah, yeah, Kirk is dead.
Oh, yeah, immediately. He was dead before his body hit the floor.
Right, because then
The thing I really like about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we've all seen tons of horror movies, and usually it's, oh, here's a camera shot of us looking at the victim, and oh, the evil stalker person is looking at you, and we're trying to build tension here, and we're trying to do all this. The kills in this movie are instantaneous, out of nowhere, immediate, just 1 second you're alive, and then, man, you are just dead. And I think that's what really ups the shock value of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where there is no buildup for this stuff as far as, ooh, I'm being stalked or this or that. It's just, there's Leatherface, bam, the dude's wearing a mask made out of human skin, so he's immediately scary. The character, the actor, Gunnar Hansen, he was around 340 pounds in this movie. So he's a huge, hulking dude. And
yeah, Kirk is dead.
Oh, yeah, Kirk is dead. And so then the camera...
But Pam doesn't know this because by this time Pam had actually, because it's so hot, she had actually gone away from the house and to sit on like a bench that was we'll call it, just say 40 yards from the front of the house. And so some time elapses, probably not a whole lot, but then she starts to call out his name, and then right, and it's normal behavior. But then she goes to the house, of course, because that's where Kirk was, and then, of course, she has a reason to go into now, because to find Kirk. And so she opens the door. Or actually, I take that back. Does she actually open the door? She knocks.
The screen door is closed, but the main door is open, so she can see in. And then she she opens the screen door and steps in, and then she starts hearing the noise off to the left.
Right. She does go in. And then, again, very quickly, Leatherface appears, and then, of course, she sees this guy. And, yeah, she knows, I got to run.
Well, but let's set that scene a little bit more, because she walks in, and she hears this noise from this other room, not where Kirk went, but this other room off to the side. And she hears more noise in there, like, not sure what it is. Noise plays a really big role in this film. And then she trips over this bucket that's laying there, and she kind of collapses into this other room, and it's filled with bones and feathers, and there's teeth all over. There's a chicken inside a cage.
It's like a living room. She had gone into the house and gone into the living room.
And so there's, Robert Burns is the set director of this film, and this house is completely macabre and unsettling. There are just these interesting designs done where it's like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of skulls, but they're actually attached to the electrical power, so there's light coming out of them. There's all these weird sculptures in there out of bones, animal bones, human bones, all sorts of stuffed animals, some of which are rotting away, and this and that really decayed. And it's a really brilliant piece of set design from Robert Burns.
So you think that the cook, Leatherface, Hitcher, they lived there. And so somewhere, one of them, I would probably say it would be the hitchhiker, has like an artistic bent. And so he is taking his artistic curiosities, but in a very macabre fashion. And this living room is an example of the things he has created. Yeah, and it's just trashed in there and nasty. And so then Pam's like, okay, I should not be here. And so then she starts she's abhorred. She's a normal person. She's completely grossed out by what she's in now. And she throws up, and then she gets up and starts walking out, right? And the other thing I will point out about this scene, Pam walking up to the house, and then when she collapses into the room, the director made a specific point to make sure you understood that she has a bare back, and she is not clothed in the back, and we'll get to why that
is so important later. But she tries to flee, and then Leatherface appears again and immediately chases her down. This big hulking guy who's way faster than she is picks her up.
Right. If she just didn't have a opportunity to leave, I think she could outrun him easily. But Leatherface appears suddenly, and she just, there's just not enough time for her to escape. So he just lunges and just grabs her. But she had managed to make it out to the front porch, but there's just not enough space for her to get away.
Right.
He grabs her, and of course, is a lot bigger and stronger. And he picks her up, and he forcibly, takes her.
Yep, and then basically this is the scene where if anybody was going to walk out of the theater, this would be the scene. She is screaming. Leatherface is making some very macabre noises, some of which are kind of laughter. He walks into this, I don't know, kitchen area maybe, but the camera clearly shows that there's some meat hooks hanging in here, and he's going to put her on that, again showing that she's got a unclothed bare back. She's kind of like wearing like I don't know what that would be, but it ties around her neck. But the director is setting the scene that, yep, this is going to be bad. And then he picks her up and drops her on that meat hook.
Yeah, she puts her on the meat hook.
And then the camera immediately cuts to the pain on her face as her hands are behind her. She's trying to, of course, lift herself off this meat hook. So there's no way that's ever going to happen. The camera then follows Leatherface as he kind of throws this big old fork down. He picks up a chainsaw. And then while Pam is dangling on the meat hook behind Leatherface, the camera is clearly showing that he is now going to be chainsawing up Pam's boyfriend, Kirk, right there.
Right, Kirk's body is right there. So Pam can see what has happened and transpired to Kirk. Yeah, so Leatherface gets a chainsaw and cuts up Kirk's body, yeah.
And so the thing...
right in front of her, yeah.
Right in front of her. And so I'm going to just go off on an aside here for a second, Gene, but director Tobe Hooper actually was under the impression that this movie was going to get a PG rating. Back in the 70s, of course, PG was a little freer than it is now. And so you could have some pretty intense content in a PG movie. I mean, an example would be Jaws. Jaws was rated PG. And so Tobe Hooper was actually working with the ratings board saying, well, you can't show a lot of blood. You don't want to do a lot of gore, and we can probably pass your movie with a PG if that's the way it plays out. And so even though I'm describing the film the way we are, you don't see anything. The reason Tobe Hooper wanted to make sure you knew that her back was bare was just to heighten the fact that, we're going to put her on this meat hook, but you're not going to see anything. You don't see any blood rushing off her. You don't see a meat hook protruding out of her back or going into her back. You don't see the meat hook coming out the front. Right. And you don't. Yeah, and you don't see the chainsaw digging into Kirk's body or anything like that. There is very little blood. The only real blood we've seen to this point is the hitchhiker cutting his own hand and then the hitchhiker cutting Franklin's arm. Right, and even in that case, there would be copious amounts of blood in there. In either of those cases, there's not. And so a good backstory there is, Tobe Hooper was a little surprised when he didn't get his PG rating for a movie that ended up being banned in a lot of other countries. Right. But anyway, so Pam and Kirk are both dead, and then the film cuts back to... Well, is Pam dead? Well, you assume she's dead. Right. And so now there's just Franklin, Sally, Franklin, Jerry. Mm-hmm. Right. And so then Jerry now decides, hey, it's getting a little late. I need to go find these guys. What the deal is. He goes off on his own to find them, and he kind of repeats walks in Pam and Kirk's footsteps. Right. With obvious results. Obvious bad outcome, yes. Yeah, because he walks in their footsteps in every way, and including up to when because then he goes into the house, and then he goes into the room, and he finds, I think by that time, for some miraculous reason, that room had been incredibly cleaned up. Like there wasn't a lot of blood around. And so, but Jerry is in the same room where Pam had been put on the meat hook and where Kirk's body had been chopped up by the chainsaw
which there should have been blood. Like, we all know how chainsaws operate. Blood all over the place, but there's not. Yeah, there's not. But then he hears like knocking from like a freezer, and then he opens it up, and then who's in the freezer? Is Pam, and then Pam jumps out of the freezer like she's still alive. So I think maybe she wasn't quite dead yet.
Right.
She was just barely hanging on, and she jumps out of the freezer, and that's when Leatherface comes in with a hammer, and then does to Jerry the same thing that he did to Kirk.
Right. And then there's another great scene right after he does that where you're getting a little bit of an understanding of the Leatherface character, because it's almost like he's confused as to why all these people are coming into his house. Because remember, he kind of is freaking out, and he runs over to the window and he throws the curtains open. He's looking around down there. It's like, are there more people walking into my house? What is happening here?
Yeah, it's just, again, it brings up that point I was bringing up earlier about mental health, is that, and there are parallels with humor here, because Franklin has a mental health problem. Well, again, because we'll say it on the modern terms, he's on the spectrum. Leatherface is clearly on the spectrum. There was that guy at the gas station who was on the spectrum. So we have people here who are, on the autistic spectrum. And Leatherface, he clearly doesn't know what's going on. And,
Well, and the Leatherface character, too, is...
But Leatherface also, he doesn't talk.
Right.
All he can do is make vocalizations.
Right. There's a sequence where he does attempt to communicate, but it's all just gibberish. But the other thing to remember about or think about with the Leatherface character, you see, so he likes to wear someone else's face. So he's killed people, he kind of cuts their faces off, he tans them up or whatever, and then wears them. And so the only face we've seen with him so far is what's like the killing face. I'm going to be killing people here.
It's gray. It has big ears. It has eyebrows on it. Right.
And then as we go, you'll see two other mask faces that he wears. One is like an old woman when he's kind of preparing dinner.
Right. That face actually has lipstick on it.
No, that's the one before. And then that's the third face. So the third face is now I'm going to be at the dinner table because we have a guest, and so now I'm going to wear my beautiful woman mask, my face. So his personality.
I guess I missed the second face.
Yeah, the second face is when the hitchhiker and the cook both come back to the house, and he's in the kitchen there preparing dinner. So he's got his domestic old woman mask on, face on. And so he's living, you're seeing his personality, or whatever his personality is or his mood is at that time, he has a different face that he wears. So
right. I would think that thinking about this world, again, I like the character of the dark characters, the hitchhiker. He has a certain real manic energy, but he definitely does have a certain kind of creativity about him, and so his mind does operate on a certain creative level. And I could see that. You have to wonder, like, who created these dark art pieces? Who created these masks? And I'm kind of thinking that it was probably the hitchhiker that created all these things that would have enough energy, and maybe the artistic sense to do that, because he did and there were some clues to that, because when he was kicked out of the van, with his own blood, he tried to make a little image on their van with his blood, and so it shows that he has kind of an artistic bent. Of course, it's very dark, but so I think he is the one who probably created these masks. The hitchhiker.
And we're jumping ahead a tiny bit there in the film, but really, at this point, the film has gone back to Sally and Franklin, and they don't know what to do now. It is dark now, and they're honking the horn of the van, and they're, Franklin's like, hey, we should probably go back to that gas station and get some help. Of course, the keys are gone. Either Pam or Jerry or Kirk had the keys.
Right, of course.
And so Sally's like, well, I'm going to go and see if I can find him. And then Franklin's like, I'm going to go with you. Right. And so then you get the most
you get a
crazy
definitely
sequence.
You get definitely a brother sister dynamic here, because Franklin's he is really being an idiot, because this is a big sequence about a flashlight. you know, and so, yeah.
And so
Eventually, they go off together. Sally's pushing Franklin in his wheelchair. And again, Franklin's kind of a big guy. Like, yeah, through the woods. So
Through the
it's
woods.
extremely difficult
Yeah.
for Sally.
And then probably the second most famous sequence in this
Yes.
film happens, which is Leatherface again appears out of nowhere, and as Sally can do nothing more than watch and scream, Leatherface is chainsawing Franklin in his wheelchair there.
Yeah, Sally and Franklin are attempting to go down like a path. And then Leatherface, of course, they're making tons of noise. Leatherface hears them coming. He hides behind a tree. When they get close enough, he turns out of the tree, starts his chainsaw. Of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an expert at running chainsaws. So he starts his chainsaw. Yeah, and he just plunges it into Franklin's body as is in the wheelchair, yeah.
And again,
And Sally can do nothing. What can she do?
She's screaming, watching it happen, which is another intense sequence in this film where you don't, again, see anything really happening.
No, you don't.
It's well shot, and it's just really creepy. And again, Leatherface, exactly. You don't see him there. He just appears once again, and that chainsaw's fired up and going. And so it's really brutal.
It leads to a sequence, again, that it kind of defies explanation, because Sally should easily be able to outrun this guy. Leatherface is gargantuan.
Yep.
Yeah, but somehow she can't, and this is a really long chase sequence.
Which
and
I
I wondered at the length of it. It just keeps going on, and finally you're just like, you're kind of tired of it. It's like, come on.
Oh no, loved every second of it.
Really? I'm just like, this is ridiculous. It's like, come on, and they enter this like briar patch, right? And so, of course, Sally is just trying to peel away, but Leatherface got a chainsaw, so he's cutting his way through this. It's comical in a way. It's like the director, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?
Oh, what you're doing is making one of the greatest horror films of all time.
Yeah, but this particular sequence, this long chase sequence here.
Oh, I love every second of it. But the thing I will point out, Gene, is Gunnar Hansen who plays Leatherface, and then Marilyn Burns, who plays Sally.
Yeah.
Gunnar Hansen kept catching her. So they're filming this thing, and he continually caught her, and he complained about she's so damn slow. She couldn't run very fast. And so they always had, so there'll be the scenes where you'll see Sally run in front of the camera, and she'll get way down there, and then here comes Gunnar Hansen, because he can catch her. He could catch her every time. So he'd be like, and so he's saying like, oh yeah, when I would stop to cut the briar patch, it wasn't because it was in my way. It's because if I kept going, I'd catch her, and we'd have to do the scene again.
But it just doesn't make sense. Leatherface is some big hulking guy, and he's running with the chain. How can you run with the chain? I mean, come on.
Right, yeah.
And then Sally, she should.
Well,
if you're running for your life, I think it gives you a little extra speed.
Yeah.
And then anyway, Sally gets away, and where does she end up? She ends up at the gas station.
Well, and let's talk very briefly though, because the first place she runs to is the house where the crazy people live, and she.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this.
So she runs in there.
Yes.
She runs up the stairs. We haven't been upstairs in this house yet. She runs up the stairs.
I got to interject right here though. This house is an interesting house, because downstairs, it's like the hitchhiker has created his artistic fantasies there, and it's just awful. Yeah, his artistic creations, which are creative. Like there's a full skeleton, and there's a light bulb within the skeleton. So the skeleton has become like a lamp. It's just like, oh my gosh. But it's just, you have to admire the creativity there. And so anyway, but she runs upstairs, and all of a sudden the house changes, because it has like this blue wallpaper, which is just beautiful. The banister is made out of wood. Doesn't have a single mark on it. Like the wainscoting on the wall is immaculate. It's like the upstairs is like beautiful. It's like how the house was at one time, and then she runs into a back room, and the back room's kind of decrepit, but there are Yeah, Roger, you take it away. There are two
Well,
people there, and you meet
mhm.
at this, which is really strange. Is the fourth member of this family?
Right, and so you
Right.
don't realize there is a fourth member of the family yet, but she runs into this room, and there's the decaying corpse of a woman, and what
Maybe grandmother.
probably grandmother, and then what also appears to be the corpse of grandpa,
Right.
which later on you realize is he's somehow still alive. But there's again taxidermied animals that are kind of falling apart in there, and this and that.
Right.
But meanwhile, she's kind of freaking out about this, and then meanwhile, Leatherface is downstairs chainsawing the door open.
Right, because she closed it and
She
locked
closed it and locked it. So she starts to come back down the stairs, and then Leatherface does breach the door. And there's little bits of, I don't know if it was intentional comedy or not, but there's definitely little bits of black comedy in this film. And this is one sequence of it. Because as Sally is coming down the stairs, Leatherface has gotten through the door. He's down there looking one way. Sally screams because he's right there, and Leatherface actually flinches. Did you catch that? Where he like flinches and the saw goes back behind him, like, oh, you scared me right there.
it. No, I missed that part, but doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and so then he chases her up the stairs. She jumps.
And Sally, I'm just gonna let it. Sally in this movie jumps through two windows, and right
Yes.
here she jumps out a window. The window's closed, and she just jumps through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then but she's on the second floor. Remember, she got up the steps, and so she falls the whole floor or story, and then lands on the grass. And you know, it's just, of course, shaken, but still able to run. And yeah, and then that's when the chase sequence begins.
And so
Correct.
then, well, this is the second part of the chase sequence because she chased her all around, and then she went into the house. She jumps out the window. Now he's chasing her some more, which then leads her to
Right.
the
Okay.
gas
Good.
station.
Good corrections. Good. Thank
To
you.
the gas station, where the cook character,
Meets
the
the cook.
gas station attendant,
Right.
is there, and she is way over the top, freaking out. Which her acting here again is just great, because you believe that this person has just gone through this complete nightmare of trying to get away from this hulking maniac with a chainsaw. But she's trying to explain what's going on, and the cook character is like, well, hey, I'm going to get my truck. We'll get out of here. And then very quickly she discovers that, no, there's something else wrong here, because he walks out of the truck and he's got a burlap sack and he's got
And rope.
a rope. And she's
Yeah.
like, what's going on?
Yeah, he's not taking me to safety.
And so she grabs a knife, but he grabs a broom and kind of beats her down with the broom, breaks the broom over her, eventually incapacitates her, puts her in the bag, ties her up, throws her in the truck. And then again, another kind of sequence of comedy, right? The door is open of his shop. The lights are on. He gets in the truck. He's got her in the truck. He starts it, notices that he's got his door and light still open. So he shuts the car off, goes back and turns the power off, locks the door, comes back in. He's like, yeah, the power, can't be paying the power bill here.
Right. Doesn't he mention something about that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. And he's like, yeah, that he exists in both worlds.
Mhm.
He has to take care of these normal business things.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so
At the same
then-
time, he is just abducted this woman.
Right, and then it's a driving sequence, and I love the lighting during this sequence, because it's basically just the instrument lights kind of illuminating the grimace on his face, and just kind of the struggle this character has with being normal and not being normal, because he keeps trying to reassure her that everything's going to be okay, but then he also jabs her with the broken broom handle just to make her scream out. And
Yeah, I think he had done this thing before. He had played
Oh,
this
yeah.
role before. So he knew what was going to happen and where he was taking her for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, he's mocking her, and yeah, he's bringing her to Leatherface and the hitchhiker.
Yep, and
Yeah.
so
and they have they set up a little dinner.
Yep, and so there is another sequence right before they get to the house where the older brother there, the cook character, sees the hitchhiker kind of walking towards the house, and you kind of get a better understanding of the brotherly dynamic here, because clearly the cook character is in charge. He's got his broken broom handle. He's kind of beating the guy a little bit, talking about you can't keep going to this graveyard and doing this stuff. You're going to get caught and all this stuff.
Yeah, the cook is kind of like the lead here, right?
Mhm.
Acts like the father.
Right.
And so I guess that's why I thought he was the father. But yeah,
Yeah.
he with a broom handle, he beats Leatherface.
The
And-
hitchhiker.
No, he hits Leatherface,
Right,
right?
later
yeah.
on. Mhm.
And then he berates the hitchhiker character.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And
he's
so they-
definitely like the patriarchal.
Yeah. Well, and the
One of the
reason, of
family.
course, he beats Leatherface a little bit with the broom handle is another great sequence where the hitchhiker and the cook get to the house. They start to drag Sally into the house. The cook character realizes that Leatherface has chainsawed their front door all to pieces.
Right.
And the great
He
line,
talks
you know,
about the
great line
door.
there. Where he's like, "Look what your brother did to the door." Another great comedic line there. But then they get the Sally in. The hitchhiker character kind of undoes the burlap sack, and you know she now realizes, oh, there's the hitchhiker guy that we picked up earlier, and the hitchhiker is kind of poking her like, oh, I thought you were in such a hurry, and all this stuff.
Yeah,
But then
and
it cuts to the sequence where Leatherface is in that grandmotherly mask, the more domestic face mask, and then the cook comes in and is basically, did you get them all? Did you get them? And Leatherface is attempting to communicate. You see the wheelchair sitting in the corner there where he's brought the wheelchair in. And then, of course, the brother's like, well, you ruined the door, and he hits him anyway. So he's
Right,
kind of got
yeah.
that sadism streak there where he likes to beat on both of those characters.
Yeah, they're preparing dinner, and the cook tells the hitchhiker and Leatherface to go get Grandpa because they're ready for dinner. So they go upstairs and they get Grandpa. He's in, and they bring him downstairs. And before, when Sally was there, yeah, this guy's dead. This is a body. But then they, poor Sally. So Sally's all tied up. So the hitchhiker grabs her hand, cuts her finger, puts her finger inside the Grandpa's
Mhm.
mouth.
Yeah.
And he seems to like blood or something like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, he's.
And he like wakes up and he is not dead.
Mhm.
And so this guy is alive.
Well, and that grandpa character, when that blood was Sally's blood, he was drinking that. His hands were kind of like
Yeah,
a
he was
little
like
baby. you
like
know?
he was like a baby,
yeah,
right,
It
right.
was great.
Yeah, oftentimes, yeah. Yes,
And so-
he had reverted to that.
This leads us to the dinner sequence. Again, a very famous sequence, very claustrophobic. It was very difficult to film this sequence. But at the end of the day, it's just you're understanding the dynamics between it within this family. They're trying to justify their actions. They're including Grandpa in their mealtime here. So
Right.
there's definitely that family dynamic going on. But eventually, oh, and I should also point out that Sally is tied to an armchair. And when I say armchair, the handles of this chair are arms.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're maybe a previous victim
Yeah.
or something like that.
Mhm.
Clearly, it's just a chair and it has like it has wood arms, but they're attached to the arms were the actual arm
Right.
of somebody else.
Yeah.
So Sally's arms are on the arm of
The armchair. Yeah.
the armchair. Yes,
Great.
yes.
It's great.
So yeah. it's
And
pretty
so
creepy.
anyway, they have an interplay there. It's more just, creeping you out, and they do a lot of close-ups of Sally's eye during this, which just is heightening kind of the fear. She's screaming the whole time.
She has a lot of screaming. Yeah, this whole dinner sequence, she's screaming, and the cook, Leatherface hitchhiker, are just making fun of her, especially the hitchhiker. The hitchhiker's just mocking her without mercy.
Right.
And so finally they decide that they're gonna do the deed, and so they untie, poor Sally, and they get a big bucket, and Leatherface forces Sally, to get into position where, her head is over the bucket. And of course, the cook, Leatherface hitchhiker, could have just killed her easily with this big hammer, this like metal hammer. But no, they decide to have some fun, and they give the hammer to, who do they give it to? Roger, who do they give it to?
Yeah, give it to Grandpa.
They give it to Grandpa.
And
who's-
the specific line is, "Hey, Grandpa, let's let him have a whack." right?
Yeah.
And so they're gonna, you know,
But Grandpa is in an infantile state, and
yeah,
so he can barely hold the hammer.
right.
He can't even really hold that, and he misses numerous times
Hmm.
trying to whack poor Sally. And then eventually, this Sally in her trying to get free, she does get free.
Well, and I
You
mean,
know?
there's that thing where the hitchhiker starts like, he starts losing patience, and he's like, "I'll just do it," and
Right,
that
right.
gives her the window where he kind of releases her for a second to grab the hammer,
Right,
and then
right,
she
right.
can get
Because
out.
the hitchhiker and Leatherface are holding her, right?
And then once again, she goes diving through another plate
And then
glass
she goes
window.
through another window. So Sally goes through two windows. Yeah. And so she goes through another window, but it's not on the second floor. So she's out, and then she's more capable of
Well,
running
and the
now.
sun is coming up too,
Right,
so
and she
it's
jumps out the window,
daytime, and so
and it's daytime,
you've
so-
had this understanding that this entire sequence has been going on for a lengthy period of time. So she's now it's daytime, and she's trying to flee. She is pretty banged up, and the hitchhiker comes out with his straight razor that he cut Franklin with earlier, and boy, he is going to town on her back.
Yeah, of course, the hitchhiker can catch up to Sally, and because Sally gets a little head start, but the hitchhiker, of course, can catch her, and he does. But instead of just tackling her and stopping it right there, he's making fun of her, and with his knife, he's like slashing her in the back.
Yeah.
As they're running, right.
And so he's so involved, and then Leatherface, of course, is pursuing with the chainsaw. And this is the iconic view from most of the videotape releases and things like that of Leatherface in his kind of suit and tie with his look like that. But because the hitchhiker is so involved in just slashing up Sally's back, they go out onto the road, and they don't realize here's this big semi barreling down the road.
Right, the hitchhiker doesn't realize that. He's like so transfixed. And so what happens is like Sally, she avoids the truck, but not the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
And the hitchhiker ends up under the wheels of the truck. So it's the end of him.
Oh, yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. There is no coming back from what happened to him.
Yeah, but now Leatherface appears, and there's this guy who comes out of this truck.
It's the Black Mariah truck.
Was it Maria?
It was Mariah.
Black Mariah. It says Black Mariah on the truck. So, and the character's black. He's kind of a big black guy. He comes out. He's like, this just wants to help out. He just helps Sally, and then, of course, Leatherface appears. Then they both get into the cab of the truck. But instead of driving off, they go through the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Like they exit the truck from the passenger side. But before they leave, I'll call him the Black Mariah, he grabs this metal wrench. And then Leatherface, after he scratches the Black Mariah's truck with his chainsaw, he runs around the front, and then he sees them on the other side of the truck, and he starts chasing them. And then Black Mariah turns around, and he throws this wrench at Leatherface and hits him in the head. Yeah, and then he falls to the ground. But, of course, he's got a running chainsaw. Oh, my gosh. What happens to Leatherface? He cuts his own leg with his own chainsaw.
Mm-hmm. So now Leatherface is kind of limping slowly towards them all.
Right.
And then another truck appears, and Sally is just covered in blood, head to toe at this point. And this other truck pulls over. She is struggling to just jump into the bed of this truck. Leatherface is approaching. She gets into the truck just as Leatherface swings the saw at her, missing her. The truck drives away. Leatherface is kind of pursuing for a second, and then just puts his chainsaw up in the air in a threatening manner and starts swinging the chainsaw around. The cameras goes back to Sally, who is obviously relieved to be out of that situation, but you question now her mental state because she has gone through such an ordeal here, and the laughter that is going on from her there is, how is she going to recover from this trauma? Film cuts back to Leatherface swinging the chainsaw around.
Yeah, that's what he's doing, is dance in the road.
Little dance in the road.
With the chainsaw, yeah.
And then the film just stops, and then it cuts to credits.
I was wondering about the Black Maria.
Right.
But with the beauty of our technology, I was watching it on my iPad. because I didn't want to watch this on my TV and have my kids see this monstrosity. So I was watching it on my iPad. But you can with your finger you can move the movie into you can even almost examine by scene. And so it turns out that when the truck appears, this looks like Leatherface is distracted, and so the Black Maria, the black trucker, he just runs down the road,
Right.
and you can see him. Like I think if you're watching the movie normal time, it's easy to miss, but I slowed the movie down, and you could see him running down the road to safety, and he runs off, and he's just gone.
Yeah.
And then I think Leatherface is distracted, and he sees Sally trying to get into the truck, and he tries to get Sally, and then he just loses track of the black trucker who has just run down the road. So he escapes to safety as well, which is good.
And probably far less traumatized than Sally.
Right. He would be a witness to when the police arrived to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
the police would come.
That's basically the whole
the movie.
film right there.
83 minutes.
83 minutes, and we actually talked for longer than the movie is.
Oh my gosh.
But that's the beauty of this film. And even though Gene is not really recommending it to anyone, you can see that there's a lot going on with this film, and it's just a matter of, is it your cup of tea or not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you call yourself a horror movie fan, then you should see it. But do I say it's a great horror movie? No, because I just think there are too many points along the line where you can just make fun of it, or it's kind of making fun of itself. But again, I like the movie. I have a little dichotomy here. I don't like it. Parts I do like it. But I like the part of it that it does show that America, this movie is like a dichotomy. There's like like I mentioned before, the Sally Franklin, Pam Kirk, Jerry world, and then there's the Cook, Leatherface, Hitchhiker world. And oftentimes this Cook, Leatherface, Hitchhiker world exists, and it does exist, but we don't see it. It exists. It's kind of invisible, And so we can see this in our modern world even. It's like, with it in every part of our country, there's this homelessness crisis, and this is an example of the Cook, Leatherface, Hitchhiker world. And I'm not saying that the homeless people are
crazy killers.
Please don't go there. But it's a world again that's kind of exists out of sight, and now this is kind of like it's becoming a little bit more visible again with the homelessness crisis. But it's just like there's worlds here that are kind of coming into contact with each other.
Right.
And so it kind of brings up this little social commentary, and it brings up a little bit about, it gets in a little bit about like meat packing and that kind of whole world too. And it's kind of macabre and
right
in and of itself. So, which is another kind of social commentary as well. Makes me think of, I read this book a little while ago by Eric Schlosser, Fast Food Nation. Makes me think about that. So, but yeah, a lot going on in this movie. Again, it's like here we are. We talked about this movie longer than maybe the movie lasted, but
right.
Hopefully you made it through. Hopefully you were interesting.
Yeah. And again, I will just reiterate, I truly believe if you are calling yourself a horror film fan and you have not seen this movie, you need to do that. It is, again, one of my favorite movies of all time in the both horror and just traditional movie realms. Love it. As you know, there were many, many sequels and remakes and all this to it. Tobe Hooper did do the sequel, Texas Chainsaw 2, radically different style in that film. All of the other films, you can watch them if you want. None of them are all that great. This is the one and only lightning in a bottle and just a brilliant film. So, Gene, anything final? I think we've talked this one.
Yeah, we've talked this out. I'm done talking.
We will call it good for now, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
All right.